Welcome to the podcast Black Sky Stop Fake. Today we are going to talk about Russian disinformation, Russian propaganda in Latin America. Why is it so prominent? Why is it so easy for Russia to reach to the people living in Latin America? With me are my colleagues Dmitry Antoniuk from Kyiv, Ukraine, and Antonio Jimenez, today from Lublin, Poland, but originally from Venezuela. And Antonio, I would like to ask you first question. I would like to ask you, what is the situation of disinformation? How far do this do those Russian tentacles reach in the region, in Latin America?
Yeah, let's start by saying that Russian information operations in Latin America are exceptionally broad and complex, encompassing economic, diplomatic, and media driving initiatives. By leveraging disinformation, economic coercion, and political action, Moscow has systematically fostered anti US sentiment, undermined democratic institutions, and influenced the behavior of regional governments to align with their interest. The strategic maneuvering is particularly significant given the region's importance to the US geopolitical influence. The current Russian disinformation ecosystem is deeply active in the region, in Latin America. Moscow's objectives include counterbalancing US dominance in the region by portraying American interests as exploitative and extractive. Um, Taking the examples of the 20th centuries of the 20th century, the interventionism in the region. These countries serve as conduits. For example, we have Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua, authoritarian regimes with deeply ties with Russia, and they serve as conduits for disseminating Moscow's narratives, integrating them into the region's organic information flow. Russian television broadcast in Spanish began in 2009 and escalated significantly after 2014 annexion of Crimea, and these have played a central role in these efforts. For example, Russian influence overlaps with platforms like Telesur, a regional broadcasting media founded in 2009 by Hugo Chavez in Venezuela, and overlaps with Hispan TV, an Iranian state media. They propagate anti-US narratives. These networks serve as critical vehicles for spreading disinformation while reinforcing divisive messaging against not only the US, but also the European Union and the G7 group.
And I spent myself a year and a half in South America, in Ecuador, and since then I've been following this information space, info space of South America, especially Ecuador, but also Peru, also other countries, Argentina, Brazil, and I can see that those media, the RT, former Russia Today, or Sputnik, are really considered just normal media like BBC or other, or some CNN or some Spanish El País, which also has many divisions in many Latin American countries. And for people, for example, in Ecuador, but I assume it's similar in other countries of the region. It's like another source of information, so it's as reliable as CNN is, well, RT or Sputnik. Do you agree?
In my opinion, these like we have big problems with the transmission of international information in Latin America. Um, these Russian states, yeah, like the Russian broadcast media, offers an attractive idea for Latin Americans, because they, as you said, RT and Sputnik, for example, are part of the regional television in many cases. So there is a lack of West media, yes, um, to inform about international news, and people. Well, most of the people rely to this Russian disinformation media, Sputnik, RT, and well, Telesur also in a bigger extent.
Dmitro, tell us what's the Ukrainian perspective on the region? What do Ukrainians think about Latin America? Latin America? What are the relations, and why do you think? What is the Russian point in interfering in this info space in Latin America?
Well, for the Russia, it's a very big aim to have a big influences in those countries, because they are very important globally. And hearing and seeing that, also from Ukrainian perspective, that Russia and its propaganda has successes in the region of Latin America is for us very disturbing, of course. Especially taking into consideration the fact that we are looking also globally for the for all for weapons possible. Let us remember that during the times of Soviet Union had very close ties with some Latin American countries, with such as Cuba, Peru as well, and some others. And Soviet Union was exporting its weapons, its arms to those countries. And now came a time when we are searching for that Soviet Union weapon and equipment, because our army in the first place was trained to use that equipment. And for us, for instance, the aid, the help from Argentina and its new president, Mr. Javier Milei, is very pleasant, very important as well, very such aid give us hope to also to have our influence maybe in that region. But we also remember that, for instance, an organization which is called BRICS starts with letter B for Brazil. And in Ukraine, we are convinced that BRICS is totally Russian and Chinese organization in the first place. And for us, it means that all things connected to BRICS are to the contrary of Ukraine. They are, let's say so, they are our enemies, right? And for us, Brazil, which is one of the biggest countries in the world and very important country in by means of economy, um, to see that Russia has a also big influence in that country is very frustrating. But from the other hand, we also have maybe this influence is not so crucial, but we have and we remember that in those countries like Brazil and Argentina, there are also Ukrainian descendants. There are diasporas. There are Ukrainians that live in those countries starting from the end of 19th century, and they possibly also have their influence on what is going on politically in those countries. But to tell you the truth, I remember that that Soviet influence was present from, let's say, from the 60s, from even from the 50s, 70s, especially 80s, when Soviet propaganda always gave gave the inhabitants of Soviet Union this um, this information that it's always bloody influence of Americans, of these capitalists in those countries, like let's say Peru and Cuba. And it was always there. The Russian, the Soviet, and now Russian propaganda in that region. So we understand why nowadays Russia has Russia has its vivid voice in those countries.
Well, it's even on some cultural level, this Soviet influence is still present in those countries. You can see, you can meet people. I knew myself a few Lenins, some Stalins. People just consider them to be some important figures. Sometimes not not really knowing who they were in the first place, and they are just some big figures from the history. And also BRICS, and also I think this disinformation and propaganda operations in South America, in Latin America, because also Mexico, uh, are not only aimed right now. Of course, they are harmful for Ukraine, but I think the scope of this plan is larger than Ukraine. It's not only Ukraine. It's not only in light of current war against Ukraine, but it's part of a bigger hybrid operation against whole West, against especially the United States, and of course their influence. And to be honest, I think we have to admit that uh, the opinion, the critical opinion again towards the United States in many Latin American countries, uh, well, it's not pointless, it's not baseless. It's actually there are much harm have been done by the United States in those countries. In Ecuador, for example, just very tiny example. There is a city, a small, well, a town. I would say in Amazonia, there is a town in Amazon region. There is a town named after one oil company. So this economical exploitation of the region, exploitation of Latin America uh, by the West is a fact, and this is on what Russia builds. Also, this anti-colonial mm, sentiments, anti-Western, anti-European, and especially anti-American. And American, of course, I mean the U.S. because, well, we are still speaking about Americas to Americas. Why do you think, Antonio, this Russian disinformation, Russian propaganda is so prominent? What are the factors? Some human factors or political factors? Political factors we've mostly covered, I think. Maybe cultural and human factors in the region.
I would say that yeah, like there is a lack of a strategy from the West also to explain by the media or what's the position of the West towards the war. Most of the people, for example, from Argentina, from Brazil, from Chile, they just think that because the conflict is far away, they shouldn't be involved. So that's a very bad thing to think. So I think that the West hasn't done enough things to in order to show and to explain the importance of why Ukraine should win this war.
But why do you think people believe this propaganda? Why do they go and read RT or Sputnik instead of, I don't know, El País, for example?
I think it's like the Russian media, as I said, is since 2009 very uh, connected with even regionals media outlets, and I'm telling you, like we're not talking only about like we're talking about local television, like uh, Telesur, for example, is viewed in more than 4 or 5 countries in South America, and they broadcast for free, and most of the people, like let's say they have like a public television, and they rely to this station, and well, people like get highly disinformated. Yeah.
I think it's important to note that we are not only talking about regimes that are openly pro-Russian. We are also talking about the societies that are really well politically free, and they have thriving democracy, or well, democracy of a kind. But there are different powers. In some governments are pro-Western, for example, as it is mostly, for example, now in Ecuador. The government is rather pro-Western, I would say, but still in society there are very strong anti-Western tendencies, very strong anti-American, anti-US, anti-European sentiments. And many leftist movements referring to indigenous people, especially, they are exploiting this narrative of indigenous people oppressed by colonizers. And of course, we know that there was oppression from colonizers, right?
Yeah, I would say that the Kremlin has used these internal divisions in the region, not only in Peru but also in Ecuador, in Brazil, in Venezuela, and this anti-sentiment feeling, anti-sentiment sentimiento, anti-US, also to show and to transmit this information.
I believe that here we have the same narrative of Russian propaganda with this colonists thing, right? Which is directed towards the indigenous people, like we have, like Russia has in Africa. It's the same politic that they conduct here in Latin America and there in Africa. But and Russia in its propaganda tries to picture itself like a liberator, right? Like a country that has the best freedom in the world, which is a total lie, because we know from history and we know now that Russia was spreading itself like a disease, like a cancer, invading invading more and more countries around. So it's a lie, actually. But from the other hand, American government unfortunately helps people in Latin America dislike United States, especially now when newly newly elected President Donald Trump said that he may confiscate canal in Panama from the Panama state in favor of United States because the fares are too high for the U.S. ships to go through the canal, etc., etc. So I don't believe that this attitude helps building good relationships, friendly relationships between common Latin American people and people from the United States.
And
Yeah, and talking about the Russian government supporting the indigenous um, um, people, and well, we have seen also in 2019, for example, like electoral meddling in South American elections. Evo Morales, for example, in 2019, and there are proofs that the Russian government financed and by Rusatom the campaign of Evo Morales, for example. We have also proofs that the Russian government has financed Petro's campaign in Colombia also in 2019. Yeah.
also, I think there is a factor like this human factor. Many people are not that, I would say, politically aware in South America. There are a lot of people who are not well educated and they don't know how to look for sources. They don't know the history. They don't. There are just many things they don't know, and well, in for example, I'm referring to my personal experience from Ecuador, but it's normal for people, for politicians to, for example, give out food, like literal food, to people who are going to vote for them later, and it's normal. Or it's even in a case of religion, the people go to that church that offers something. So if there is a dinner after mass, they are going to this church, and if there is some activities for children, they will go to another church. They have their beliefs, of course, they have their priorities, but I think, unfortunately, because of lack of education and especially political education, they sometimes just go for what seems to be the most profitable for them or most attractive for them. And if someone says, "Oh, it's the United States that oppresses us, and we cannot do anything because of colonization and because of the West," they are going to believe it because they live in poverty, they don't have money, and it's very difficult for them. And people in very difficult economic situation, they tend to look for responsibles.
I would like to add that, in my opinion, it maybe I mistake, but it seems that West, global West, loses the war for the minds of the people in Latin America right now, because loses this war to Russian propaganda, to Russia Today, to Sputnik, and to other Russian connected to Russia channels. So it's very important to have this region in mind and to fight for it.
I'm pretty sure we are going to get back to this topic in our next podcast because we only touched it a bit. So there is still a lot to speak about. Thank you very much. Thank you for participating, and thank you to our listeners, to our viewers for being with us. And stay tuned for the next Black Sky Stop Fake podcasts.